Hello, welcome to the annual Write Hive conference. This year is jam-packed with a ton of great sessions for writers, writing professionals, and the publishing industry. Write Hive is a nonprofit serving the writing community with resources, events, programming, connections, and more. The 2022 conference brings you this panel, Anthologies from Inception to Bookshelf, where we will discuss the process and challenges of putting together a multi-author anthology. My name is Julie. I am a graphic artist and a fantasy writer. Today I have with me 4 awesome panelists, and we're very excited to get the conversation going. I'll let you go ahead and introduce yourselves. Lauren, would you like to start?
Sure. So my name is Lauren Davila. I have been an anthologist for around a year now. My first anthology actually just released in May. It's called When Other People Saw Us, They Saw the Dead, and it's a BIPOC Gothic anthology from Haunt Publishing. And I have 2 other Latinx anthologies featuring genre, so sci-fi, fantasy, romance, and Gothic horror releasing this upcoming September.
Yeah, I'm Jessica Spotswood. I'm a YA author and anthologist. I've edited 2 YA historical and historical fantasy anthologies, A Tyranny of Petticoats and The Radical Elements. And then I co-edited with Tess Sharp a YA witch anthology called Twail and Trouble.
I'm Dahlia Adler, also YA author and anthologist. I have a bunch of novels out, including most recently Home Field Advantage. And I have been publishing anthologies since 2019. My specialty is retellings of classic literature. So my first one is His Hideous Heart, now available in paperback. And that is a collection of reimaginings of the works of Edgar Allan Poe. And then I also have That Way Madness Lies, which is a similar collection, but Shakespeare. And coming up in November, I have At Midnight, which is same concept, but fairy tales. And then taking things in a different direction in 2024, when I will have a co-edited anthology with Jennifer Icapelli called Out of Our League, that's all about girls in sports.
Hello, everyone. My name is Amparo Ortiz. I'm also a YA author and an anthologist. But unlike everyone here, my anthology is currently still available for pre-order. It's not on shelves yet. It is called Our Shadows Have Claws. It is this one right here. And it is 15 monster stories from Latin American myths. And I'm also the author of the Blaze Wrath Games duology. I'm a contributor to a Marvel Comics anthology of Latinx superheroes. So I have been a contributor mostly. I'm also contributing to Dahlia's upcoming Out of Our League anthology. So I'm more in the contributor aspect of it, and this will be my very first anthology as a co-editor. I'm co-editing it with Shamile Said Mendez, author of Furia and a bunch of children's books.
Awesome, thanks everybody. So first question, just keep it very broad. Why decide to create an anthology?
Yes, I feel like you're like a godmother of YA anthologies, so you need to answer this first. She was my first anthology editor.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. Dahlia is in The Radical Elements. Honestly, for me, it was sort of selfish. I thought of a theme, historical fiction, that I've always loved as a reader since I was a YA reader myself. And current adult Jess also loves historical fiction and fantasy. I always want to see more of it in YA, and so I was able to solicit some of my favorite authors, some who are already writing a lot of historical fiction in the YA sphere, like Elizabeth Wein, like Kekla Magoon, and some like Marie Lu and Marissa Meyer who hadn't yet written historical fiction, and asked them to write short stories for me. So it was such a treat to get to work with authors that I really admired and get to read these short stories that felt like they had been written just for me. So yeah, that was what started my anthology journey, honestly. Just thinking I love to edit, and this is something I want to see more of. What if I can help bring some of that into the world?
Yeah, I also really love to edit. That's my background and profession, besides all this. And for me, what's been really great with these anthologies is getting to bring them. They're really popular in classrooms, which is so not something I ever thought would be like a venue for my books, because I write much, fluffier contemporary romances that aren't necessarily big classroom books, but these have been a really great way to get more young adult authors in the classroom, get more perspectives in these stories we kind of all have to study at school. You know, so many of us have sat through Poe and Shakespeare, and sometimes we love them and sometimes we hate them, and sometimes we just feel like, I really wish that had taken a different direction, or I really wish that hadn't given this impression for centuries of what it's like to be X kind of person. I really wish there weren't 8 zillion stories about cross-dressing that never address, you know, potentially actually being a different gender, for example. So I really love the idea of making Poe and Shakespeare and fairy tales potentially relatable to and reflective of more kids in classrooms, more readers in general. And I love the idea of getting people to get excited about the classics through these stories, and also to just discover more authors. I love when people find favorite authors from my anthologies. That's like the best feeling.
Yeah, I guess I'll kind of just echo Jessica and Dahlia here, and just speak to a little bit to Dahlia's. Like, I've personally taught parts of the Poe anthology in like my college classroom, so like I can speak to like that. You know, the students love them, and they're always so excited to see like themselves reflected in some of these classic stories. But I think like it is a little bit selfish. Like, it's something that personally for me, I'm like, I want to see this theme, and I'm so excited about it. And really just figuring out sort of what role we can have in terms of amplifying other voices. And it's something that's really exciting because it's not just that you're working on it, you have the chance to help, you know, fit between normally like 15 to 20 other people as well as access these specific themes. So for me, that's the exciting.
Yeah, I'm just going to be a parrot right now and say exactly what everyone has said. But I also wanted to kind of highlight the fact that in my case, I was hoping that someone else would come up with this idea. And then I realized that specifically people who share my marginalization, I'm a Latina author, I'm from Puerto Rico, I've always lived in Puerto Rico, and we have very distinctive myths when it comes to what we shouldn't do, who we should fear if we misbehave as children, especially. And I feel like a lot of people know the boogeyman, but they don't know the boogeyman in different regions or countries. And I felt like that was a question that I wanted answered, but I didn't want to answer it myself. And then people were like, no, you should take it upon yourself to do this because you have a perspective or a voice that maybe isn't on shelves right now. So I felt like in that sense, I was selfish, but I had no idea that people were that excited and that curious about things that were so familiar to me. So I guess that's where it spawned for me.
That's awesome. So yeah, widening up, what would you say is the most difficult stage of preparing an anthology, or what's your favorite part?
I mean, so far, I feel like my favorite part has been getting to invite my favorite authors and people who have never written what I'm hoping to have them write, and just having that challenge be accepted means a lot to me because it tells me that they trust me. It tells me that they are excited about something that I'm excited about, and shared excitement is always great. So, and I think the hardest is putting aside my fangirl self and understanding that this is a job and they're taking me seriously, therefore I have to take myself seriously, if that makes sense. So I feel like that would be and also I'm very impatient, and I feel like editing anthologies is a very long process. So maybe that should be also considered a challenge.
Yeah, that fangirl thing is no joke. Like, the more you do, I think the more emboldened you get to invite authors who you might have been afraid to invite the first time around, but now you have a little cred. So you're like, you know, or you just think, you know, you shoot your shot. But sometimes it's really intimidating to think of editing your favorite authors. And the fact that they said yes is already amazing. But you really have to put aside your imposter syndrome at editing the authors that you idolize, if you're lucky enough to get them in your collection, and just do it. I've never had one respond like, you are a worse author than I am, so I'm actually not going to listen to your notes. I mean, they can't. Like, so, you know, everyone's on a level playing field as one of your contributors when that happens. But like, no joke, that's a really hard part that people do not take into consideration when they're having like dream contributor lists. Yeah. My favorite part is when the stories roll in and you're just like, oh my God, this is so good. Oh, this is going to be my favorite. Oh my God, another one came in that's at least as good, if not better. And they just like, maybe you're not going to love every single one, but the number that you do is just astonishing to me. And the people who nail it in one shot and you send back like, maybe add the word "and" in this sentence is like, oh my God, it's such a cool feeling. Paperwork is the worst. I'm going with paperwork. It's a lot.
Yeah, I agree that getting to read the short stories for the first time is my favorite part. It's just so magical. I think one of the hardest parts for me is that imposter syndrome, especially around the big picture edits. I love line editing, but with the big picture stuff, it feels so subjective sometimes what is and isn't working. And I try to ask a lot of questions and stress that the decisions are always ultimately up to the author, but I'm always a little worried about like how it will be received, especially if it's an author that I don't know as well or haven't worked with before. And again, no one has ever been terrible. Everyone's been pretty lovely to work with, but I'm still just always a little anxious about it until I hear back from them.
Yeah, and I can speak a little bit too because I feel like I have a slightly different experience than everybody else here, only because right now I've been working specifically with small and indie presses. So all of my anthologies up to this point, I have some others in the works that will be different, but have been like open submission calls. So that has been a big process because normally my anthologies range between about 15 to 20 stories, and I've received like hundreds of submissions. So it's definitely a process to like whittle it down and figure out sort of which stories fit where. So for me, it's like a puzzle, like looking at all of these different pitches and also trying to get like a good breadth of, more established authors, some mid-range, and then also some authors who maybe this would be like their first published piece and giving some new authors a chance in that aspect. So for me, that's definitely the hardest part because like you get to like the final 50 stories or 50 possible pitches and you're like, I'd love to accept every single one of these, but sometimes it's just not possible. But I'm starting to get into some of the other stages where I'm starting to solicit a little bit more and trying to fill some extra spots in anthologies. And so that's been an interesting experience. I can speak to what everybody else is saying with that imposter syndrome of me just like reaching out and I'm like, oh no, will they want to be included in this? So that's definitely interesting thing. But the best part is seeing all the stories fit together for me, like seeing how they interplay with the theme and with each other. And some of the like two stories, it seems like they're like siblings almost, and you don't expect that when you're starting in the process. So for me, it's sort of just those kismet situations that pop up.
Yeah, I guess a related question. Has anybody done both the traditional publishing and the small press experience? I'm curious more about how those processes differ.
So I guess I'm
I
the
guess
only one that can speak to
Yeah.
that just a little bit. So the indie small press experience it's been like really interesting. Like I personally, I'm like loving it so far. I've gotten to work really, really closely with like smaller teams. And so a few of the anthologies that I haven't announced yet and have in the works and still sort of behind the scenes with, we're working with, agents and taking it a more traditional publishing route. And so it's sort of interesting to see how they both work. Right now I'm at the stage where like I only have the small indie press experience. So I can't necessarily speak to as much of the traditional, but it's been really interesting because for me, like I'm a communication person. Like I love to consistently be in contact and talking. And so having some of these small presses where maybe the editors aren't working on as many books as some traditional presses is something that's been really wonderful for me, and especially managing multiple anthologies with many different contributors and keeping track of all of them.
I mean, I feel like I've only been working with big houses, and I do this because that varies. People will interpret that as they will. But I feel like one difference for me in terms of like within themselves or between themselves, I should say, it's the amount of care that you're given, because this specific anthology, I had an offer from Algonquin, which is the publisher, and I had another offer from another publisher, which is bigger, and they offered more money. And at first, we were considering, Shamile and I, co-editors, we have the same literary agent, so it was an easier, smoother process for us and a much faster process. And we were considering both offers, and we said, I feel like we would be more or better tended to or better cared for with the smaller house than with the bigger house. And I feel like most people would rationally choose more money because it would mean upfront a greater guarantee that the house cares about them. But at the same time, you have to look at marketing plans. You have to look at what the editing style of your acquiring editor is versus your own. You have to compare so many things, like without any surefire way to do so. It's just based on guessing and based on your instincts as well and prior knowledge of other experiences that other people have had. And you're just hoping that everything works out. And in this case, it worked out very well for everyone involved. I feel like this team truly cares about this specific project. And considering it has no direct precedent, because it is the first of its kind in English, I feel like it just means a lot to me.
Yeah, I feel like there are certain publishers who just do a really good job with anthologies and feel like they care about them. And size is not necessarily a huge factor in that, because I think two of the absolute best with that are smaller publishers, Algonquin being one of them, and Candlewick being the other. Candlewick is the only one that I know does your paperwork for you, which is a really big deal. I know I keep coming back to this, but like,
oh, actually, Algonquin does it too.
And Algonquin too. So like, that's not nothing.
That is not normal.
I literally had to turn down editing an anthology because I couldn't do the paperwork in the necessary time. The editing timeline would have been fine, but the paperwork is incredible. Like, and that means contracting with contributors and paying contributors, negotiating with agents for each contract, doing taxes in every year that they get paid. If it earns out, you're doing that forever with royalties. So when I say paperwork, I mean real paperwork, and also just a ton of correspondence and negotiations. So I would weigh that against money like pretty heavily. I would take less money for a publisher that did that for sure. It's a big deal. But yeah, I think Algonquin and Candlewick in particular are just really fantastic smaller publishers that are just amazing with anthologies. Don't get me wrong, I love mine, but as far as there's only two authors who do anthologies with them. Like they're not known for anthologies, so it's a little different. Like I was their first one in a different, they like learned on me, and they did great. I'm super happy with Flatiron, and I'm begging them to buy more for me. Just to throw that out there. But yeah, the publishers really make such a difference. And with indie, one thing I know is they're crowdfunded a lot. So it's just a totally different payment model, and it's not something that I have experience with. But I see it, the different, the different crowdfunding websites, and they'll be like, and if we get this amount of money, then we can add 2 stories. And it's just like a different kind of flexibility based on the upfront money. Whereas with a traditional publisher, you're going to get an advance and you're going to use that to help decide how many contributors you have right off the bat. And there's no flexibility to that when you decide you want to add somebody else. Like if you want to add somebody to a traditional anthology after your advance is set, you can choose to do that out of your own pocket and only with publisher approval. I did in fact do that once, but like, that's it. So it's different flexibility, but you're also working a lot harder to get that money part as opposed to getting an advance from a traditional publisher. So that's a really, really big difference between indie and traditional. As with all things, the money and the flexibility are really huge trade-offs that differ in those paths.
Yeah,
I would definitely say like sorry, Jess, go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to chime in and say, yes, Candlewick published A Tyranny of Petticoats and The Radical Element, and they were such a dream to work with. I would do more anthologies with them in a heartbeat. They were so supportive at every step of the way, from the editorial support from the acquiring editors to marketing and publicity support, and they do all the contractual payments, all of the tax stuff, so I didn't have to do that paperwork, which when I Toil and Trouble was edited or was acquired by Inkyard, and I did have to do all the paperwork for that one. And I was like, oh, I was so spoiled for the first 2. I didn't realize quite how much work it would be
Awesome.
Lauren,
Well,
you were.
Oh.
Oh,
nope.
I just,
Okay.
Lauren had something to say.
Oh, I completely forgot about it. The only thing I was going to chime in on was that yes, I've like run some crowdsourcing campaigns, some Kickstarters for some of the indie anthologies that I'm working on, and I'm going to be running a couple of campaigns in the next couple months. And so, yeah, it's a whole different ballpark. So, I mean, especially with what you all are talking about with the paperwork, yeah, like I don't have to run through that aspect, but there is sort of a different experience with the crowdfunding, and definitely a lot of like personal marketing and making sure to wrangle all the contributors too as well to sort of do some of that indie marketing as well. So yeah, that was the only other thing I was going to.
Well, pulling back from all the fun paperwork stuff to the fun part of actually choosing the stories to include, what tips do you have for choosing the overall theme? Which I guess a lot of you have touched on that already. Yeah, tips on choosing the theme or choosing what actually goes into the anthology.
I can start off on this one, and I feel like for me it's just like I always say it's like vibes, just like what am I feeling, or like what do I want, or what do I wish was out there. So I know it's kind of like what we've all touched a little bit on in like the slightly selfish aspect of editing an anthology of like I'm gonna speak for me, but like I personally maybe don't see this, and I've done some research and I've looked for it and I can't find it. And I also think too, like, would it translate better as like a individualized novel, or is it something that you think multiple people would have a take on or be interested in? I've seen, so many different possible themes. Like right now, like reimaginings and retellings are very, very big. So like I personally also have some reimagined retelling anthologies coming out soon. But yeah, the themes can range completely. Like one of the anthologies that I'm working on right now was sparked by like like a picture of it, like an abandoned theme park that had all this like nature overgrown within all of the different metals. So like that picture like sparked an entire anthology that I'm going to be publishing in next year. So yeah, it's just I feel like it comes from anywhere and everywhere, but yeah, it's vibes is what I guess I'm going to go with.
A lot of times it comes from like what's big, and sometimes it kicks off a trend. Like I feel like Toil and Trouble was coming at a good witchy time, but like the number of witchy YA novels since Toil and Trouble is like out of control in the best way. And retellings are definitely big with YA novels, which kind of gets, it's something I have to take into consideration when I make my lineups, because I don't necessarily want to fill these collections with people who are already doing it in full length form. I'm like, they're already doing it and crushing it in full length form. You see how they do it, what they do, what it looks like when they do it. So I like to get contributors that have some experience in some element of it. So with Poe, it wasn't people doing Poe reimaginings, but it was people writing in genres that really align with Poe. So people who were well known for dark fantasy, for horror, stuff like that, are the people I really wanted for His Hideous Heart. And then That Way Madness Lies, which is Shakespeare. Again, Shakespeare reimaginings are massive in YA. I did want to pull in a couple of people who were doing those. Not really people who only do those, but people who had done, actually, I pulled in some of that too. But I thought it would be fun to see how they do it in short form. And with that one, I also considered representation more. There were things in Shakespeare's work I particularly wanted to see from a marginalized perspective that sort of tackled how Shakespeare's work has been harmful to a lot of marginalized people. And I wanted them to be able to kind of reclaim their stories or show them through another light, or make a different character more relatable. Like as a Jewish author, I wrote a story that gave Shylock a lot more agency. So that was really important to me in that collection. And then just in terms of the subjects of the anthologies as a whole, when His Hideous Heart worked, I wanted to do more like it. I wanted to have something that would be kind of a buddy for it, that could go next to it in a classroom. And then same thing, moved on. What else do I want to do retellings with? And I want to keep that as a theme and keep that together. And I have really loved doing that and think that works. In general, you just need to have kind of a strong point of view and explain like why it earns its own collection. It's a much more competitive market than people think. It is really hard. Like for every anthology you see, and sometimes it feels like there are a billion, you have no idea how many that sound amazing have been rejected. Like, it is personally depressing to me how many I know of that I know would have been incredible, but publishers didn't know how to make it stand out, didn't really know what to do with it. And they can't be that experimental with it because you can't throw out a tiny advance from a traditional publisher because it has to cover the contributors and the editor. So there isn't quite as much freedom to play with something that you don't have enough faith in terms of its own success and your abilities to publicize and market it well. So yeah, it's a tricky market, and your idea needs some solidity behind it for sure, and a target audience for sure.
Part of my point of view for all three of my anthologies is the contributors are all women or non-binary or trans authors. And I encourage folks to write female characters who are marginalized, whether by virtue of gender or religion or neurodivergence or race or sexuality, or their profession they choose at the time, if it's the historical anthologies. And I think with all three of them, but particularly with the historical anthologies, I was also thinking, how could this appeal to the school and library market? Because that's like Dahlia said earlier, that's such a big part of anthology sales. But a lot of it was just, I personally felt like I read enough about men in history growing up, and I wanted to read as a reader, to read more about women throughout history being badass, and particularly get some of those marginalized voices that history has ignored for so long, and learn about, even though they're historical fiction and fantasy, a lot of them draw on true life heroines. A lot of them are incorporating facts from history that settings, things I didn't know about. So yeah, I think that was a big fun part of it for me when I was choosing my themes.
For me, it's actually quite similar to Jess because we wanted mostly women and non-binary contributors because horror is not necessarily known, whether it's in the English language market or Spanish language markets. We don't really have a lot of women in horror and non-binary authors in horror that are well known and respected. That's important to say. And it just turns out that my specific vision for it was to include Central America, South America, and Caribbean authors. And so it just so happened that we got representation from every region that I wanted. And we only have one Mexican contributor or Mexican American contributor and 4 Puerto Rican contributors, which was not planned. I'm including myself in this category in this list, but I really wanted countries and cultures that weren't really known in either language within horror. So that was something that we really had to talk about. Shamile, my co-editor, was more concerned about the library and school aspect of the appeal. But I was like, okay, so it can't be, too gory on the page. Can we leave things on the page that are quite gory, or do we have to be more imaginative with the horror? And that was a conversation with our acquiring editor that we've had through every stage of the process. And of course, it's warranted. But I feel like I really wanted stories set in places that weren't already featured specifically for young adult readers in the horror genre. And that was really important. And, just turned out that everyone is either a woman or a non-binary contributor. And I'm really excited about that.
Awesome. So I know some of you have done anthologies by yourself and then with co-editors. How would you find that the differences between doing it yourself versus doing it with the co-editor?
I love having a co-editor for Out of Our League. As I mentioned, is Jennifer Icapelli. She's really well known for sports romance. And for me, the best thing about it, besides the fact that she's so incredibly on the ball, it's amazing, and has definitely picked up some slack as I juggle a lot of things, is that it enables me to do something in which I'm not a super expert because she is. So we're able to combine the fact that I really know editing and anthologies in general, and then she really knows sports, and those two things combined together have really fit like puzzle pieces in this great way, where I think the collection is so much better for having the two of us together than it would have been either of us doing it alone. So that's amazing. And then obviously things like just sharing the work and having an extra person to bounce it off of. Because the publishing editor generally does do some editing, but it's pretty light. The anthology editor, like us, does a lot before it gets to the publisher. And sometimes they don't do any editing. I mean, it depends on the individual. But so, you know, we did so much back and forth, and just to have somebody at that stage of it to bounce off of is pretty amazing. For my retelling anthologies, I do them all myself. And so when I'm sort of unsure about something, it's more of a battle of how to handle it with nobody to really sound off with me, unless I want to tap on the publishing editor's shoulder, which, you know, I like to do more sparingly than I would somebody that I can just kind of like text, hey, what do you think about this? So that's been really nice. Having a partner is pretty great in that regard, and has really expanded what I can do, which is cool, and just makes the whole logistical process more manageable for sure.
I agree. For Toil and Trouble, I was able to co-edit with Tess Sharp, and it was really great. In that instance, our acquiring editor was a little less involved than my Candlewick acquiring editors. And so it was just having her to bounce ideas off of, like Dahlia said. You know, there were a few, you know, it's just not crazy issues with authors or anything, but issues that came up, you know, with stories running late, or, you know, just some things like that, and tricky edit situations. And it was really nice to be able to go to Tess without having to elevate it to the acquiring editor, which can feel a little more, I don't know, fraught. So yeah, that was lovely. I mean, honestly, I'm really bossy, and so I feel like it was a little bit of an adjustment sometimes, because I had done 2 on my own first. And so I was like, okay, you have to wait and like see what Tess thinks about things. You can't just jump in and respond. My co-editor Tess also lives in the mountains and has like some tricky internet issues sometimes. So I was like, you like Amparo said, patience is not always my strong suit. So I was like, okay, I have to wait for like Tess's internet to work so she can respond to this email as well, and like check in with her before I officially respond to things. Just kind of funny, after just being so used to, for the first 2 anthologies, to respond, everything, you know, was just kind of on me. But once I learned to share, it was good.
I love once I learned to share.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's really hard.
But I feel
I
like,
get to let go of the control.
yeah, like
You need to
this
be
is my-
something of a control freak to do an anthology. So
So
And it
giving up
doesn't
some
help.
control you've had, you know, to yourself for a while is tough when you're a person who's not inclined to do that.
yes. But I feel like matching style, or not matching, but different yet complementary styles works best. You don't have to be, you know, the same person copy pasted. But I feel like, for example, Shamile is a little bit more laid back in terms of the responding to emails and the keeping up schedule, like Excel worksheet type of planning and keeping everything like under control in that sense. But she's a fantastic writer and editor. So I feel like when I read her feedback on the stories, I feel like a lesser editor, just because the level of detail that she brings to the commentary and the way that she visualizes or envisions the story's potential pales in comparison to mine. So I feel like I don't want to get too astrological, but I am a Capricorn, I have to say it. So I feel like everything regarding control and structure and form, it's where I thrive. So I'm usually on top of the more admin type of stuff. And when it comes to actually critiquing and working with our acquiring editor, I'm more straightforward, and I feel like it's the same with them. And Shamile is a little bit more like, I don't know how to, like, all encompassing when it comes to doing the more editorial stuff. And I'm more like, no, this is it, this is it, this is it, and that's it. So yeah, we balance each other out.
We're going to need to
That's how you
take
wanna
like
be.
a poll of every anthologist's zodiac sign now, and
Yes.
see where we all fall in order to see why we all want to do this.
Aquarius, if that helps explain anything.
Oh, interesting.
I gotta tell you,
I'm a
I know nothing
Cancer,
about
so-
astrology. I'm like, I think that means I'm independent. I know nothing else.
You give me Aquarius energy. Yes, yes.
Yes.
I'm a
know that.
Taurus.
Oh, of course. Of course. That makes sense.
I feel like I have to mention now, there is an anthology coming out.
Yes.
Co-edited by
All
three
signs
editors
point
called,
yes.
All signs point to yes.
All signs point yes.
Mhm.
And that's all stories relating to star signs. And I am planning to finally learn about astrology from it. I'm really excited.
Yes. One of my best friends is a
Teacher
Virgo.
manual.
Yes, and she wrote the Virgo story, so it's really exciting. Yeah, she's a Virgo through and through. Yeah.
Yeah. That means.
Pivoting from the anthologist point of view to the contributor or writer point of view, I know all of you are writers also, and some of you have contributed to the anthologies. What are the benefits of having a story in an anthology for an author? Or why would they want to submit it to an open call? I think
I
Dahlia
agree.
mentioned it better, like when she said, oh, I love it when people find their new favorite author from my anthologies. I think that's it. Not that I'm expecting someone to say, yes, she's my favorite. No, but it exposes your work to people who might not know who you are or that wouldn't know who you are outside of this specific project, because you're not writing in their usual genres of preference, or your style is not meshing with their reading style. Your writing style doesn't mesh with their reading style. So it gives you an opportunity to be exposed to readers that normally you wouldn't be. And it also gives you a sense of community, that you belong somewhere and that people are encouraging you along the way, because this can be a very isolating job. You're basically by yourself in front of a computer or a tablet, or if you scribble on your phone as well, or you write on your phone, that's great. I can't do that, but congratulations to you. And it's just it's a good way to be reminded that you belong somewhere, like you have a team to fall back on. I don't know if that makes me sound extremely mushy, but it's true.
It doesn't, but it's interesting
That-
because it's not the experience with every anthology. And I love that you're having it
Oh.
with yours.
Okay.
But it can be that sometimes it is like that. And sometimes you are like, I swear only 3 of my authors remember they are in this collection.
Oh no.
like- It will vary per project. So His Hideous Heart was very like, at least to me, we're all in this together, and then it kind of gets progressively. But yeah, I mean, just you pick up, somebody will pick up an anthology because of one of the best-selling authors in it, and then discover their favorite story is actually by somebody they never heard of. Is pretty amazing. What I love about being a contributor, like when Jess invited me to the Radical Element, I was like, I don't know how to write short stories. But I was like, you know what? Like, when else am I ever going to try something that's so far outside of my comfort zone? And I think that is like one of the greatest gifts that anthologies have to offer, is something that you are not ready to write in a full novel, or you are not interested in writing in a full novel, but you would love to tell a story about. It's such a great way to dip your toe into something. So that was my first short story. That was my first real historical. I've only done historical as anthology contributions. The other one was set in 1994 though, so it's a little bit of a cop-out. But that's the only way that I would do historical. That's how I learned I am not meant to do it for a novel. But it was my first Jewish main character, and that was a really big deal to me. Like, that was how I was able to dip my toe into writing a Jewish character in fiction. And since then, I have now written into novels, but I definitely needed to do it in a short story first, to get comfortable. So that was a really big deal to me. And I think that's a big deal to a lot of people, getting to write in a genre you normally wouldn't. And especially because authors are kind of so expected to like have a brand. Anthology stories are a way you don't have to stick to your brand. So if in your publishing track, like, you are contemporary romance only, but somebody for some reason invites you to an anthology that does horror, like, you get to do your branch out, you get to show your skill range. And for a lot of authors, actually, it's been a jumping off point to full novels. And I love when that happens. There are books that have totally spun off of anthology stories. That's Melinda Lowe's Last Night at the Telegraph Club was from her story in Radical Element, no? I think.
No, I
No?
wish, but no, she wasn't in the Radical Element. It might have been
No, in All Out. In
Yeah.
All Out. Sorry, yes, the anthology edited by Sandra Mitchell. I'm sorry, I knew it was an anthology I was in.
That's okay.
But yeah, that came from All Out. And I know Joy McCullough, who did a screenplay based on King Lear for That Way Madness Lies, also did a book that, like, an inspired novel for her that she ended up selling. So it's very cool when that happens.
I think as an author, it's really fun, yeah, to get to try a new genre, or even just little craft differences that you've been wanting to challenge yourself with, whether that's like trying to write something in third person instead of first, or trying to write something in present tense instead of past, or to focus really in on a setting, a story that is really focused, where that's maybe the first part of it that comes to you rather than character or plot. So I think you can set yourself these kind of micro challenges that you can then, once you've practiced it in a short story, you can carry on in your other work. And then, as Dahlia said, I feel like I've said that a million times during this, but I read a lot of the anthology reviews because I find them fascinating. And one of the big things that I see over and over is that idea that people come to the anthology because they're interested in the theme, or they're interested in one or two favorite authors who've contributed stories, and then they discover new authors and they say, in their review, oh, I'm going to go read everything that this person has written. I'm going to go look at all of their backlists. And it's such a great way to, sip at different authors and see who you like, and then go and hopefully buy their work.
Yeah, I guess I'll kind of jump in with what everyone's saying, because I think that like the craft of writing a short story is something that's so different. And I think unless you've like gone through like a very traditional like MFA program where you like sit and like learn how to write a short story, it can sometimes seem daunting. Like I've reached out to certain people before and they're like, I've never read it, I've never written a short story. Like I don't think that this is something that like I could do justice to. And so I think it's sometimes just, if you want to, and it's something that is interesting, and even if you maybe don't know how to do it, that's such a nebulous idea, like that has to be the specific craft way. But I think it's something that is appealing, because it's, I don't want to say it's less, it's not as high stakes as a full novel, but in some ways it is, because you're in an anthology with multiple other contributors, and so you do sort of have that ability to move back and forth and work with other people and see sort of how the process goes. And in terms of something that is nice, I'm kind of with Amparo on this, but like the community aspect for me, and like maybe this is just because I've been working with a lot of these Indian small presses, but a lot of the contributors have formed really, really strong bonds. Like they've started like beta reading each other's works and editing, and helping each other in terms of like querying specific agents, or leaving agents and moving to other agencies, and just sort of that aspect of finding that community. And maybe it is because I'm working very specifically with a lot of marginalized and diverse communities who maybe already feel alienated from traditional publishing spaces. And so this is definitely a way to sort of create that built-in community. And I personally, for every one of my anthologies, like set up a Discord chat for all of the contributors. And so it's funny, even while I'm like sitting here doing this, I'm like seeing all of these different spots coming up, and somebody was talking about some pitch contest that's going on today, or asking if anybody had heard of this agent or so and so. And so I think it's something that personally for me, like I've seen a lot of community building happening around my anthologies, which is wonderful for me as an editor and an anthologist, for being able to just even be a part of facilitating some of those bonds and friendships.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it's really fun. Like I know that's why Amparo was talking about it. I was like, I have that too, don't worry.
Yeah. I also just like forcing friendships. So I just make everyone my
like
friend.
Everybody's got to be friends.
They have no choice.
Everyone has to be friends.
Like forcing friendships.
Awesome. So this is more of a question for open call anthologies, but do you have any advice for authors on how they can put their best foot forward when submitting their work?
Yeah, I can take this because I think I'm pretty much the only one that's done really open call anthologies. But for me, it's really just like being very authentic and having like a very strong vision for what you want your story to be. Like, I think sometimes you can definitely tell if it's a writer who's maybe like very unsure of what their story is, or I guess it kind of goes back to like the little bit of the craft elements about like maybe their plot is a little bit, it isn't where it should be, or they don't have a firm grasp on their characters. And then there's somebody who will submit and they have it, like they have their story fully formed, they're ready, they're so excited and passionate, and they're very confident in how it fits with the theme or fits with the specific pitch. And so you can definitely tell that. So I would say like flesh it out, take some time. Most of the time you have a good couple of months before calls come due when you see them. Get feedback from trusted readers and anything like that in terms of, pages that you're submitting or how you would sort of assess the story. But yeah, definitely like the passion for it and the strength of the pitch, definitely.
Awesome. And let's see, for both contributors and anthologists, do you have any other advice regarding the legal aspects? I imagine the first piece of advice is get somebody else to do your paperwork.
Yes.
But is there any other tips about watching in contracts or payment or things like that, or marketing? Just general tips.
Organized spreadsheets are your best
Yeah.
friend. Like, you want to track the dates things came in, you want to track the dates you made payments. I mean, this all sounds really boring. If you do your own taxes, TurboTax will do 1099s for you, so that part is actually not so horrible. I know this stuff is super boring. Some of the agencies are just more difficult to work with, and you will learn over time which agencies you never want to work with again, even if you love their authors. And
Yeah.
that's kind of just a fact that is unfortunate, because the authors have no idea that the agencies are getting in their way like that. But a lot of agencies will try to negotiate with you as if they're negotiating with a publisher and not literally with a single person who's an author editor and does not actually have a corporation behind them. And I don't know how to make them understand that's what they're doing, or maybe they know and they don't care, but that part is really tricky. There were a couple where I had to ask my agent, whose job it is not, to please take over and handle, because I'm like, they just came at me with 2 lawyers, like at the very initial contracting part of the stage, not like in response to something, just we're going to put 5 people on this email, including 2 lawyers. But also think, authors get very excited, or editors get very excited. I think they want to include everyone they possibly can. Just remember how the money works, which is usually that advance is going to get split, half to you, the editor, which if you have a co-editor gets split again, and then half to the contributors. So you only have as much money as you allocate to that. If you have 15 contributors, you're doing half the advance divided by 15. So you can't just suddenly make it 20 and still have everybody be happy with how much money they're getting. So you really need to keep that balance in mind and understand that is going to mean you can't have everybody you want. And it's unfortunate, and other people are not going to understand that. And you will get a lot of emails and messages that are people being upset that you didn't invite them. But that's kind of just what happens. And yeah.
Yeah, and always have like an open communication with your contributors, even if you're corresponding with their agents. It's just important for them to also be looped into every email. And especially if the agent tries to be a little bit more of the presence there, which of course they should be, but their client also has a say. And in our case, I actually noticed that in our initial agreement, we had stipulated for 16 contributors, but we ended up only having 15. Well, not only, we only had the love and passion for 15 stories. And so we realized that we were like, we didn't need to fill in that 16th spot. And we were like, oh, well, we just have 15 contributors, but we never told our contributors that there were only 15. So their initial agreements were for 16, to be split into 16 people. And then when they received their first payment, they were like, wait, why do I have more money? And I'm like, oh, right, I forgot to tell you. So it's just as busy as you are with everything in your life, just remember to keep tabs on everything, because maybe the publisher is keeping their word and doing everything by the book, but you also are the direct link between the publisher and the contributor. And so they're going to rely on you more than on the publisher itself. So.
One other big
I
thing
guess
I
I
would
can-
say, some agents put this into the contract and I love it every time they do. Strong advice from me as both a contributor and an editor is not to, to the extent you have the power, not to elevate any of your contributors over any others in any
Very
way.
important.
Like that equality, having their name in the same size, in the same place. I mean, I'm in an anthology where they didn't put everybody's names on the cover. It's just kind of like and more. And the original version of the cover didn't even have and more. And I got to tell you, it makes me never want to promote it because it feels bad.
Yeah.
So it's just something I would keep in mind. Like not every agent is going to fight for it. Not every publisher is going to fight for it. I personally think as a publishing editor, that is a fight that you have to take on no matter what. Make all your contributors feel equal. If you're doing a marketing thing, do it for everybody. Yes, that is a big piece of advice for me.
Yeah, one thing that I wanted to just touch on in terms of more of the indie and small press aspect, is I've been seeing a lot of like pay to be included anthologies popping up, which just is extremely icky. Like I've had people reach out and be like, if you like put in like $100, we can publish you in this anthology. It's horrifying, like absolutely horrifying. So I just like, I'm not too certain, like for people who are watching, it's like you're going more traditional or small press, but like my DMs are open on Twitter. Like if there's something that's shady that pops up, like please reach out to me, because there are some emails that I've been getting personally, and I know like other people in the industry who have been getting, who wants like a pay to be included anthology. So no, just like stay away from any sort of buy in to be included. No, not at all. That was my one little thing, because I've been seeing them pop up a lot in the last
That's a
couple
good
months.
thing. Yeah. Do not ever pay to publish.
Yeah. Never, ever.
Yeah.
Good advice. Another question. What are some tips for marketing once it's published and everything? Do you include the contributors in that, or is it all handled by the publisher, or what are your marketing journeys?
It is so helpful if the contributing authors can help market. I know everyone is so busy and burnt out, but it really makes a big difference. Their enthusiasm level, their participation, whether it's doing in-person events or virtual events, panels, or whether it's just, something as simple as like sharing whatever graphics you or your publisher have made, sharing, tweet, whatever platforms they're on across their social medias. Just reminding people that they are in the anthology and that they, sharing a little bit about their story, because, I can and do as much as I possibly can, but I'm just one person with, however much reach I have. And especially for sort of the tentpole authors, the bestsellers or award winners in the anthology, a lot of times they have a much bigger following than me. So, just their willingness to share is so appreciated and so important. But really everyone, because everyone who's in any of these anthologies has readers who love their work and will be excited to read more of it and read their stories. So that is my plea to anyone who's in an anthology, is when you accept, obviously life things come up, but when you accept the invitation to participate in the anthology, I think part of your obligation really is to do at least a little bit of the promotion work, and try to help with that as much as you can.
Mm-hmm. Literally, even if it's just retweeting.
Yeah.
Sounds easy.
Yeah. The one thing I actively ask for now is I ask my authors, like, if they put anthologies on their websites, if they put their contributions, like I will firmly say, please put this book on your website. Like update it and get it there and link to it and whatever. Like, so I do ask for that now. Like, there's only so much you can make them do, and you certainly can't make anybody do events that they don't want to do, but it is really nice when people do help out. They're not part of the marketing plans generally. Like, I suppose they could be. For me, they're not part of marketing plans. It's something I go back and forth with the publisher. They might give me graphics for it. What I like to do is I like to pick out a favorite quote from each story and then have the publisher put it in like a quote graphic, and I'll share one a week with a little bit about the story. And I certainly hope, you know, at least the contributor will share at least that. That's one thing I like for getting the word out there. What I did with that with That This Lies that I really liked was doing thematic panels. So we did one that was specifically on women in Shakespeare and one that was specifically on Shakespearean comedies. Not every collection is going to lend itself to that, but that was a cool thing that I really like doing, and I got, you know, different contributors interested in doing different things there. That was nice. So that was a little bit more collaboration because we had to talk about what kind of events people were open to doing. And some of the events were based on who they were. So I had, you know, people who were enthusiastic to do trans Shakespeare panels, and like that was great. Obviously that's not going to work with every lineup, but it worked really well with this one.
I think that's really important, understanding what everyone is comfortable doing or what they want to do. And in my case, our publisher actually had everyone submit or fill out a form so that they had all their social media handles and where they live. So they would cater to festivals or events that were happening around their area, closer to publication, or actually a little bit after publication so that they could still promote quite close to when the book hits shelves. And I'm a huge graphic person. Like I love making graphics. I'm not a good visual artist, but you know, the internet is great for that, for making people believe that you have some sort of talent in that regard. So what I've been doing is just like sending my publisher, what does this look like to you? Is this good? But they're like, yes, this, or, you know, they know more about color theory and fonts and all this stuff. So it's been a collaborative process between myself and the publisher, but also the publisher really wants to include the contributors. And we have a couple of contributors who are very tech savvy. They have their own YouTube channels, or they have a bigger platform on Twitter or TikTok or Instagram. And then we have someone like Julia Alvarez, who is very much in her own zone in terms of focusing mostly on the writing, and also still very open to participating and to being heavily featured as part of this anthology, when easily they could have been anyone like her, or her included, could have been like, no, it's fine, just put my name on it and we're done. But it's very important to know that when you give people the chance to feel like they are part of something and they're actually passionate about being part of that something, it just elevates the entire experience for everyone. So.
Very much.
Yeah, the only other thing I was going to add, and I know Dahlia touched a little bit on this, like I always ask my contributors to pick their own quotes. You know, I'm like, I may have a very specific, like, oh, I love this like line or sentence or whatever. And so some of the time they don't really care, like you pick whatever, but in terms of the marketing, sometimes I'll have them do that. And then sort of speaking to what Amparo said, yeah, some of them have like really specific platforms. Like I've had contributors in the past with like very popular like podcasts. And so I'm like, sure, yeah, like talk about this on your podcast or like amplified it anyway. Like I have some contributors who've like made like curated, you know, aesthetics or Spotify playlists or whatever. And like all of that in the long run, like it gets people like just interested and it's like fun and people like to see it on social media. So yeah, I'm always team include contributors wherever you can, but it's nice because then you have a, you know, however many, like a 15-person built-in marketing team that's there and championing and retweeting and reposting. So it's fun.
Awesome. I'll get a final question here. What is one thing that you wish readers and contributors knew about anthologies that we haven't touched on, if anything?
I think one thing that I would say is that it's a really great way to find new writers. Like I know we've talked a lot about that, but you know, even if you pick up an anthology and like you've only heard of one author in it, or maybe you haven't heard of any of them, like it's still a great way to find new authors. You know, if a theme appeals to you, you haven't heard of anybody, like give it a chance. It's something that's definitely a labor of love on all parts of it, from the contributors and us as anthologists. So yeah, give it a chance.
And is that so many more people want to write for them than want to read them or support them. And you kind of just have to grapple with that. You'll see like a zillion people talk about wanting to contribute to anthologies, but like they don't ever talk about having read them, and they don't necessarily you know, ever retweet your anything about them. And it's a really hard pill to swallow. It at some point in YA became kind of a prestige thing, where like everybody just sort of wanted to have it on their resume. And it's just like, you gotta care about the actual product too. You gotta care about it when it's not featuring you. You gotta care about it when it's other people's work. And I would love more people to understand that they're not going to continue getting purchased without support. And it's not that exciting to have somebody who isn't excited by anthologies, to be frank. So I would ask more people to kind of keep that in mind as they're tossing it about as things on their, sort of goal list, that there are real people working really hard behind them who would love to see that enthusiasm applied to other aspects of their publication than being one of the names on the cover. Is my much more sour, pessimistic take. Bless Lauren.
I think also something that people mistake is that because it's a short story, it'll be easier to write. So I think that just keep in mind, short stories are actually harder than full-length novels in a lot of the cases, because you have to understand structure and plotting in a way that is very, very different from writing something that's longer form. And I think that if you write graphic novels or scripts for graphic novels or comics, it'll be a little bit more familiar to you, but it's not easy. So I think that's something that I would like people to know. It's like, don't think that just because someone is inviting you to an anthology or you want to be in an anthology, oh, this is going to be so easy. No, it's not. It's not. I don't know why that accent came out when I said that. I'm so sorry.
I think I would just like people to know that they are such labors of love, but they are also so much work. I've had a lot of people contact me to ask questions about anthologies. How do I organize one? How do I put it together? And some of those people, like Dahlia, have gone on.
You're amazing.
And others have gone on to, and when I was thinking about doing mine, I went to Sandra Mitchell, because we have the same agent, and she had already done some anthologies, and she gave me, fantastic advice and a sample pitch that I then passed along. But I think sometimes people don't quite understand just how much work goes into it. Like, it is a tremendous amount of work, and I don't think any of us, some publishers pay a little bit better than others, but I don't think any of us are getting rich off of it. None of us, most of us are not, unfortunately, like hitting the New York Times bestseller list on these projects. It's something that we do because we find it really satisfying, and we love the theme and the editing of it, the getting to work with such amazing authors. Like, it's wonderful and satisfying, but it really, from the paperwork to the organizational work to, managing sort of different personalities sometimes, the actual editing work, the promotion, like it is just a ton of work. So it's not like, oh, I'm going to edit an anthology, it's a lark. Like yeah, I think that is my point.
That's such a good point, how you do it and then become a resource, because I went to you and I went to Sandra. I feel like everyone, the next couple of years, went to the two of you. And then I find a lot of people, I wrote a blog post eventually called So You Want to Edit a YA Anthology. And I think a lot of
very
people
helpful, by the way.
now.
Everyone read it.
So helpful. Thanks for
Read
that.
it. Tattoo it on your heart.
I'm so glad it's been
Everybody go
helpful.
find it.
I refuse to answer the questions anymore. I'm like, I wrote it. It has my entire proposal in it. I have nothing left to tell you.
Yeah.
Here you go.
Yeah.
My hope was to spare all of us from having to answer those kinds of questions again. So I hope it has saved some of us some grief.
Oh, for sure.
And I'll also add to
I send it to anybody.
Yeah.
I send it to everybody who asks me. I'm like, here, Tom already did it. Enjoy.
Thank you. Although I would love to see an indie version done by you.
Yes.
Yeah, I probably should do that, because I know that I have a lot of anthologies.
Yeah, and it's clearly different.
So.
It's
It's very, very different. Yeah.
Yeah. I will add to the money thing also. They very rarely earn out, and they very rarely sell foreign rights. So the labor of love thing and the needing support thing is extremely for real.
Yeah, I got to say, I'm very impressed by how passionate you all are. And I've learned so much from listening to all you talk. So thank you so much for joining us today. yeah, I'll invite you to tell us about any other upcoming projects you've got, or let us know where to find you, and then we'll conclude. Whoever wants to go.
Anybody
Yeah,
who wants?
Lauren's
Anybody
first
want to
on
go
my.
first? Okay, I can jump in first. I know I kind of touched on this right at the beginning, but as I said, I have a lot of other anthologies in the works. I believe I'm like up to 15 in the next like 3 or 4 years. So you can find me on social media at Lauren Gilmore 03 on Twitter is where I'm most active. And my website is just Lauren T. Davila, and all of my information for my anthologies and personal projects can be found there.
You can find my website at dahliaadler.com and my social media there, which is generally at Miss Dolly Lama, MISSDAHLELAMA. And my next anthology is coming out in November 22nd, 2022. It's called At Midnight. It is a wonderful, in my totally unbiased opinion, collection of fairy tale anthologies, including the original fairy tales at the back. And it's just great. It leans pretty dark, so it's full of horror and romance and fantasy and toxic parenting and all the great things that fairy tales have to offer. So that's available for pre-order everywhere now, and is available, and including on audio, At Midnight, coming from Flatiron Books, November 22nd.
I don't have an anthology coming out in the near future, although hope remains eternal that someday I will do another one. But I did just have a co-written project come out, Great or Nothing, which I co-wrote with Joy McCullough, Caroline Tung Richmond, and Tess Sharp. It's a World War II retelling of Little Women, with each of the March sisters' points of view written by a different author. And I wrote Meg.
Awesome. Well, you can find me at amparo.ortiz.com. I'm on Twitter, Instagram at amparo_ortiz, and I'm on TikTok, same, but _author after my last name. And Our Shadows Have Claws comes out September 6th. That is the anthology that I'm very excited to finally let into the world, because I want people to be creeped out in the best way by everyone's stories. And next year, I have a book coming out. It is called Last Sunrise in Eterna. It comes out in March, I believe. And that is a young adult fantasy. I have a story in Dahlia's 2024 anthology. Yay! So yeah, I have other projects that I, for some reason, have not been announced yet. But yeah, those are the ones that I can talk about.
Yes, Out of Our League 2024, coming from Bible and Friends.
Yay!
Co-edited with Jennifer Icapelli, right.
And my very first try at contemporary. My very first contemporary thing. Oh, thank you. She's just saying that.
I am not.
Well,
The
awesome.
magic of anthologies.
Yay.
Awesome. Well, that concludes the panel. Thanks again to our lovely panelists for sharing their expertise. And thank you to everybody watching, and enjoy the rest of the conference.